were you a child who was drawn to animals or could see beyond their form?
Yeah, I never saw that. In fact, I'm writing a new book. Yeah. And
You're a machine, woman.
no, not really. I started off writing, because often when I write, I like go, okay, so what the hell am I writing? What's the point? And I started telling the story of growing up, and where my, I had wonderful parents and an older brother, I still do, and I spent most of my time outdoors. I mean, this was kind of suburban. It was the Bay Area, right? In California, right? But I mean, it was wild in its own sense. And I spent all my time with animals. We had our own animals. We had goose and, Bo the Muscovy, and our dogs and our cats. And that was wigged out when the goose started living inside. Anyways, and a parrot, a wild-caught parrot, which we're sort of ashamed about, but we got him. And he's 70 years old. So we've lived together almost 50 years.
Oh my God.
Anyways, so I really didn't distinguish humans from animals. They were kind of who they were, and I wasn't in that space. And then I went to school. I went to kindergarten and da 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 da. And then as time went on, my life became dominated by human things. And so flash forward, I recently, well, I don't know, a while ago, a few years ago, I started meditating, and I had this experience with a deer who's still here. I mean, it wasn't anything like, wow, she was just doing her thing. And I looked up from my meditation, and I heard this voice saying this phrase, which it's a poem by Juan Ramirez, and that I had learned as a child, called Yo no soy, and it's talking about yo, meaning I, which he talks about in very eloquent ways, is the ego, and soy este, which is I am. Soy este is that, I am that. So distinguish, you can say, between the ego and, in spiritual terms, this sort of endless true self that lives beyond time.
Very nice.
So I was meditating, and I looked over at, I heard this, I saw the deer who was sitting close to me, and all of a sudden this voice came out, that said soyete, and I was like, wow. And then I had a flash, which was that state of meditation was reminiscent of my childhood. That was the state. Not that I was running around like, doing the lotus position.
I got you.
But I mean that mental kind of state and kind of being at that level or state or whatever you want to call it was very much like that. And that is beyond form. Mm-hmm. And that is the most difficult thing that our species, at least this version, I mean, many indigenous people don't have those issues. Charlie did not either. He was certainly, not a bear. He never considers himself a bear. But as I write about, and that he talked about, it's in the book, that when he raised these orphaned baby brown bears whose mother had been shot in Russia, and he reintroduced them, he had to become a mother bear. And that's more than like giving food and doing the right thing and then saying, okay, he had to really understand and deconstruct and dissolve these kinds of socially conditioned images of being a human and seeing through human eyes. I said he did see through human eyes, but when he was doing this, it wasn't human bear. It's kind of a common lingua franca of at what I would call, he would hate if I said this, but I wrote the damn book, so I guess. But at a spiritual level, mm-hmm. where, they don't really care what you look like. I mean, certainly I know we experience, with our dogs and cats or whomever we live with, they don't care if you're wearing curlers or, yeah. You're in your, 9th day of wearing pajamas when you get up. And that's really...
What is this, a confession? Did
Yes,
you just step into a confession
right,
booth?
right, exactly. Yeah, I had to kind of like, doll up to see you guys. So, it's really kind of at that level.
Anyway.
So as you've kind of mentioned in our conversation thus far, you, in addition to the relationship with bears, you've done a lot of work with other animals, including in 2005, you began doing the studies in post-traumatic stress disorder in non-human animals. And then later expanded to several different species, even beyond elephants with that work. Can you tell us a bit about what other species you have focused your work on?
Well, I haven't had a plan, I had been in South Africa when I first heard about these young male elephants, which became statistically significant, which is significant for science. More than 100 white and black endangered rhinoceroses were either sexually assaulted and killed by young male elephants. And so when I was doing my dissertation, that popped up from memory, and it just fell out when I looked into the neurosciences and trauma, the whole traumatology, that looking at their biographies, their autobiographies, that they were conformed to PTSD, which is the formal kind of a thing. And subsequent to that, so it wasn't elephants per se, it's just that, it was kind of interesting how elephants have followed me.
Stand out, that's for sure.
And of course, it's so obvious. So I was asked to work with chimpanzees who were survivors. They were rescued from biomedical laboratories, terribly, terribly, terribly traumatized, and conform to complex PTSD, which is typically they experience relational trauma, which happens when they're very young, some kind of abuse, some kind of trauma, and then subsequent trauma from that, sustained trauma from that, etc. And certainly in the cases of chimpanzees and primates and mice and everyone that's used in, it's kind of epidemic. But anyways, animals were not acknowledged to have a psyche. And I came from a Jungian perspective where psyche is not just like, thinking and feeling, it's spiritual, it's everything, everything that we experience. So it was a rigorous scientific demonstration that animals have psyche, which is what humans have. So PTSD, complex PTSD, are diagnoses which were developed for humans, and that was applicable to animals. Now, of course, all of that had been done on quote unquote animal models, using animals, non-human animals in labs to produce trauma. What's his name, Harlow, the horrible experiments of the rape rack and what they would do to the baby primates. It's really pathological. It's still a very strong streak in our academic and our educational system. So it wasn't a big deal, but these were free living elephants that had experienced all this. So then chimpanzees, and of course, that really focused with the Fauna Foundation in Montreal and in Canada, where these were biomedical survivors, severely, severely traumatized, sort of lost. And I also worked with parrots, captive parrots. And there were some individuals that just didn't recover.
Can you just tell us a little bit about what trans-species psychology is and how it can be used to advance animal rights?
Well, without sounding too pompous, I would say that it is the scientific architecture for the animal rights movement.
Sounds good to me.
and that's the purpose of it. It's very conventional science. It's based on science. I didn't make anything up. I just put the pieces together. And in a formal sense, you would say that all of science, the foundation, runs on a model of a unitary model of brain, mind, behavior, and consciousness. Now, what happens is that, I'm sorry, this is going to sound negative, but that's what the truth is. The truth is that in education systems, most people who study animals, who are veterinarians, who are wildlife biologists, who be ethologists, who become experts on wildlife typically, but could be domestic animals, are trained to ignore this aspect that animals are behavioral beings. It's advanced to the sense of, well, yes, they can think and yes, they can feel. But transspecies psychology says no. All animals, from what science shows, when you don't edit it, when you're not using it selectively, have the same brain structures and processes that humans do, which govern the capacities for thinking, feeling, consciousness, and everything else. Now, that doesn't mean like a bat has a certain specialization in the brain that, they use sonar, or that, a turtle can, I don't know, or parrots or whatever. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, you're talking about the things we share in common.
But the fundamental, which has been used to distinguish us, saying, well, they don't have all that. No, they do. And something to think about, I actually have a short lecture on that called Orca Ethics. But, people say, well, why don't they build cathedrals? Why don't they build highways? And I would add, why don't they engage in genocide, and guns and things like that? And the foundation is because it's not their ethics. And that doesn't mean that a bunch of chimpanzees or a bunch of elephants or whomever it is sat around and went, I don't know, should we really have an Apple or a PC? I mean, it's just not the way it goes, right? So, when you look at these archaeological or anthropological reconstructions, they're little gradual things. So the point being is these micro decisions preclude an orca making a machine gun, because they don't ever see themselves as separate from anyone else.
So would you say then, as humans, have we progressed so much that we've lost our animal instincts and intuitions, etc.?
I think we've regressed so much that these instincts,
I should say my progress was in quotes.
right, have atrophied. I think we've got them. I mean, I speak for myself. As time has gone on, I've had to sort of revitalize my senses and my MO. I mean, I have a very, I think hopefully less, real colonistic kind of thing. I remember there's this guy, I've forgotten who the hell he is. He's really funny. I mean, he's a serious scholar and a writer. And I was listening to his interview, and he's an American. He was born in the United States to either, I think they were Indian parents. And he decided to go into India. And he was dressed like an Indian, and he's walking with his Indian friend. And he said, how come people think I know I'm an American? Because he said, well, it's the way you're walking. You've got this kind of like colonistic way of walking. I'm not saying it funny like him. I mean, I'll have to find him and send it to you. He's just brilliant. It was brilliant. And that's something I had. There's certain traits. So I march from A to B, and the deer kind of go, what the hell? Well, now they're used to me. But like, what the hell is she doing? Weird. That's not the way animals function. So, that we can revitalize. One of the ways to revitalize is shut up and listen. Mm-hmm. Don't always be the initiator. Be the listener. That's who Charlie was. Charlie was a listener. And so I do think we can revitalize. And that impetus for revitalization should be clear to us now. Is if we're not in a listening mode, taking guidance from nature, including animals, in the most profound way, we ain't gonna make it.
It's true.
And the other thing is that letting go of arrogance and humility, and there's fear in that. There's a wall. I mean, I've experienced that myself. It's like, we have these big oak trees, and I grew up with them. And I had this realization, I don't know, 25 years ago. I'd come back from college and visit and talk, whatever, babble, little dramas and traumas. And then it just hit me. All I've done is, I never said, how are you feeling?
Yeah.
And sitting there with the tree, who's 400 years old, and listening. And I learned there was a little bit of fear. And I know part of that fear is I'm afraid of hearing what I hear. I mean, I do that now regularly. But I'm saying there's a tremendous amount of fear in letting go of power, letting go of control, letting go, okay, I'm not going to think about it. It may not be control in the sense I'm going to control those animals, but in the sense of letting in the senses, letting in what you really hear. It's disturbing. And people who work in the movement, vegans and others who work in the movement, when they do that, it's huge. It's huge because it's kind of like, oh my God, everything that was based on in terms of meaning and whatever is traumatogenic, A, and B, wow, how am I to live? Knowing how much suffering these two turkeys who are babies. I mean, they're 4 months old, and that's when they're slaughtered.
For sure.
I mean, they're babies, and people write these things on this email server. It's a community one, and they say, oh, we have organic turkeys. You're going to love them. They get this and that and that. We've known them since they're chicks. We call their names, and they come to us, and they love to hang out. They're $60. Want to butcher them? I mean, it's like mind-boggling.
Yeah.
So that's the mentality that we're really needing to focus on, and it's the most volatile terrain, in my opinion, for the difficulties that veganism.
You are the founder and director of the Kerulos Center for Nonviolence,
right?
The antithesis of what we've just been speaking about, and also the Tortoise and Hare Sanctuary, and the All Bull Elephant Sanctuary. Can you just tell us a bit about them and some of the programs that you offer?
Well, we're kind of in a retooling mode right now to make ourselves really accessible and effective. And the Tortoise and the Hare Sanctuary is here on our land. We have 30 acres. And I was, called up one day, or all these people called me and said, they're going to euthanize and kill all these endangered desert tortoises because the lab's closing in Nevada. So I think I called the director and I said, hi, I'm just checking, what's going on and everything like that. And I was a scientist, so,
Ooh, yeah. Playing that card, did you?
handshake. And so I said, is there anything we can do? I mean, they certainly were not in a good place, even though their goals were not mine, I should say. He said, do you want some tortoises? And I said, sure. So, mouth goes faster than brain. So we got 15 disabled. They all had an arm off or their shell was deformed. They were relinquished and the lab had them and they weren't considered to be reintroducible. And then a rabbit showed up. And so we became Tortoise and the Hare. And so we do that. And then now we have some Caporo roosters.
Oh, wow.
And also chickens and a magnificent turkey that we rescued. So we also have an education program where we have courses on traumatology, we have internships and things like that. So what I'm trying to do right now is really integrate kind of model a trans-species. What's trans-species life? It's like the Living One webinar that I mentioned to you. It's like we know what's wrong. What does right look like? How are we going to live with each other when the human-human relationship has no primacy as it used to? Mm-hmm. And vegans experience that. That's something, at least from my perspective, that a lot of people who work with me or take courses with me, a lot of the thing is that tension, like what's my relation, my relationship with my guinea pig, is more important than my parents. I mean, you know, that's the kind of stuff that comes up, and it causes a lot of difficulties. Or I'm going back, I mean, you guys have heard a million of these, you know, I'm going back to a family reunion in the Midwest, you know, and everyone's, you know, having barbecue. What do? I don't want to upset everyone because you know. So those are the kinds of things that we're aiming at, is to help facilitate. Then how do you live? We're also in a, if our vision is a world without animal exploitation, we'll just put that umbrella, then, you know, okay, if everyone stopped, you know, and became vegan overnight, we still have a lot of contradictions that are really messy and that are ethically contradictory. Absolutely. So, you know, what do you do with, you know, like a puma or a cougar who's injured, who has no food? You know, they're limited. We have this terrible drought that's going on here. You know, what do you do for them? I mean, do you give them a chicken, you know, a dead chicken from the store? You know, that's certainly contradictory. Our dogs are vegan, and our cats are not. I tried. And we have 12 cats because people dump their cats here, you know, and things like that. It's important. I think it's really important to understand that we're transitioning from one paradigm to another.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And we're at a fundamental level. And I personally find it, I mean, just mind-blowing to even give my cats, you know, canned food, because I know how it got in, and plus I don't even want them to eat it. Right? So I think it's really, that's an important thing. So anyways, in terms of what our organization is doing, is we're trying to create courses and, you know, opportunities for people to explore and understand how we transition and how to deal with this transition, and yet keep the eyes on the prize in terms of the vision that we want to have. And that to me is very important. I don't think you guys are the experts, but I started the webinar because I was doing an interview for a book or something, and a chapter in a book, and I would ask, you know, vegans, I would say, well, what's your vision? And I didn't feel, granted this is an undersampling, that there was a concrete vision of what the world would function and look like.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that we could easily continue going on for several more hours. Unfortunately, we do have a finite amount of time. I want to say thank you again for taking some time today to be on the show. And for everyone who's interested and wants to find out more about the important work that you're doing, can you just share with us your different socials and contact information for it?
It's the Kerulos Center for Nonviolence, KERULOS.
.org.
.org, yeah, right, .org. And then we're on Facebook, and there's a Tortoise and Hare Facebook. And if you go to our website, we have contact information. If I can make one plug in there, I really encourage people to read Talking with Bears, Conversations with Charlie Russell.
I read it, I loved it.
He really lived, he really lived in congruity. He really lived in congruity, and it's one example of an individual, not that everyone has to be Charlie Russell, but it's one example of interspecies relationships where there is congruity.
Yeah, he walked the walk. We are going to have you on again because I've got my 20 pages of questions. I
don't want to lose them.
So to our viewers, we appreciate your support. Again, we have a new YouTube channel, Calling All Vegans. So please like, comment, and subscribe.
And thank you again. It was a pleasure to speak with you.
Let me hold up the book.
Thank you again. It was a pleasure to meet and speak with you, and we look forward to doing this again in the near future.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail.